From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Another piece of news on this story about President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan and the challenges that are now coming to it. And I'll read just a bit of a CNN report. The Biden administration scaled back eligibility for its student loan forgiveness plan Thursday. And this has to do with federal student loans guaranteed by the government but held by private lenders. And they were initially going to be included, and now they will be not included in this forgiveness program. And Kim, some of the reporting suggests that this is a move that is being done by the Biden administration specifically because they are worried that these private financial institutions that hold these loans will sue. And I mean, am I wrong in reading this as a bit of a tacit admission that the Biden administration understands that what they're doing here is not lawful?
Oh, yeah, you're reading that exactly right. And they're worried not just that they're going to get a lawsuit from some of these private lenders, but they're worried about a lawsuit that was already filed this week by those 6 state attorney generals in Republican states. And they potentially have a claim here, too, in that one of the arguments they make in the suit is that their injury comes via the fact that their states, or at least some of them, have these quasi-state entities that technically kind of count as private institutions that are servicing these loans, and that if the Biden administration forgives them, their states will lose money. And so there was a suggestion, I think is a very strong indication, that this move by the Biden administration was both to try to make moot that lawsuit and also to ward off anything from a private lender or loan servicer. Now, I don't think it is going to save them from the state lawsuit because they make arguments about other ways that they are injured financially via this move, but this seems like a pretty cynical attempt by DOE, Department of Education, to get out of their legal travails.
But Monet, this is a fascinating move for them to change the program after the fact to try to avoid another lawsuit. And I am finding myself wondering whether this is a fact that some of these other plaintiffs are going to be citing when they finally get to court. I mean, they may point to this move and say, look, obviously the Biden administration is trying to avoid the lawsuits, and that's its whole legal plan. It knows that it doesn't have the authority unilaterally to forgive this kind of money.
Right. I mean, in as much as a guilty mind is a requirement for a successful prosecution, there seems to be no guiltier possible mind than the one the Biden administration has brought to its student loan maneuver. Obviously, he said himself as a candidate that he didn't think it was possible. Many other Democrats have said the same. And so you have this kind of retroactive legal maneuvering to try to shore it up now that they believe that it's politically popular and have made it part of their midterm push. I think it'll be interesting to see how the lawsuits pan out. Challenges are probably going to continue coming. It does seem like the sort of thing that courts usually shy away from restricting. Generally, they don't want to interfere on what the president claims is kind of a large policy prerogative of this kind. And so I think that even though the legal arguments seem to lack a lot of merit, it's something where you could see some judicial restraint. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of compromise, if there was a court order that the manner of the policy be kind of curtailed somewhat. But I do think that just the fundamental question about whether the Biden administration believes in their heart that their policy on student loans is legal, there's a very, very clear answer, and the answer is no.
Well, let's do a couple more letters because I've said it before, but I still think the Biden administration is underrating the political effect that this issue may have. And we have 2 letters here from listeners who served in the military. And let's start with Scott. He says, am I the only one who's responded to the college loan forgiveness by stopping my automatic deposits into my grandchildren's 529 accounts? I'll continue to save, but a 529 plan seems much less appealing given the uncertainty of the government's relationship to college financing. By the way, I spent 10 years in the U.S. Army Reserve to pay for my children's education. I do not regret my time of service, but I do feel somewhat taken advantage of. And that is echoed by Andrew, who says, if we're going to use service to one's country during which one writes a blank check to the government, allowing it to put them in harm's way and potentially die as the gold standard for having one's tuition paid for under the GI Bill, then any income-based repayment followed by forgiveness or this recent Biden boondoggle can only be looked at as a disgrace. He says that forgiving loans to those who made no sacrifice and instead enjoyed green campuses, inflated tuition, and marginally useful classes lacks accountability and decency. Monet, my last thought here is, again, I mean, most of the country does not have a college degree. And I think this is an issue that will play not only with Republicans, conservatives, people who are opposed to the Biden administration anyway, but a lot of people in the Democratic coalition or who used to be in the Democratic coalition, maybe people that were once considered Reagan Democrats, will be upset by this. And the higher that this issue rises as we get toward the November elections, the better I think it is for the Republican Party, who is probably promising that it will sue if they take the House of Representatives.
Yeah, I sympathize with both of those letter writers. And I do think it's just fascinating to think about the political calculation that the Democrats made when they decided to move forward on the student loan forgiveness. I think that when they first floated the idea, they got a bigger backlash than they anticipated. And so they curtailed the scale a little bit. Obviously, they're not forgiving sort of the full loan amount, they've capped it. But still, this is one of those types of policies that benefits a very small and frankly, relatively affluent group of people in a way that's just bound to make everyone else feel that they're being treated unfairly. And so you do see this now and then in politics. You know, you have political constituency that holds a lot of sway with the party in power, and the party in power decides we're going to pass this policy that benefits you, and so just kind of pay them off. I would assume that what President Biden and the people in his inner circle think is that all of the people who didn't get loan forgiveness are going to forget about it. You know, they're angry now. They got angry when they read the headlines about the policy, but they'll move on. You know, life goes on. Whereas the people who did get student loan forgiveness are never going to forget, and they're always going to be loyal to the Democrats. But frankly, I think based on the response we've seen so far, that might be a miscalculation. And there are a lot of people who are going to be very angry about it, who certainly are going to vote based on that this November. And maybe it will be a rift between the two parties that's going to have a lot of people second guessing their support for Democrats moving forward.
Thank you, Monet and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. Wall Street Journal members can also join Paul Gigot, Kimberly Strassel, and Karl Rove for a live opinion event, Can Republicans Retake Congress?, on Monday, October 17th at 7 p.m. That will be in Dallas or streamed online. And for more information, go to wsjplus.com/opinion live for tickets and more information. And as always, we'll be back here next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.